From Alan Bennett to Barbara Taylor Bradford, Soft Cell to the Kaisers, Henry Moore to Barbara Hepworth. This corner of Yorkshire has left its own indelible mark on the cultural life of Britain and the rest of the world.
And its artistic life continues to thrive to this day. Leeds is a city home to countless artists and writers, thriving theatres, independent cinemas, and one of the world's most prestigious opera companies, not to mention its great creative ambition for the city's future.
So let's raise the curtain and open the book on another edition of Streets of Leeds. So Jonathan, we are talking about culture today. Now culture, it's a vast topic, it's a huge topic. Sometimes don't even know where to begin with it. You know, when I think of culture, I think of books or I think of music, might think of sport. You know, there's a big culture around sport in the world. What are we going to be talking about?
Well, there is a definition of culture, which is the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. So collectively, does Leeds have a cultural heritage, and has Leeds made its mark on the cultural landscape of the rest of the UK? Well, today we're going to find out.
I'm starting my journey today in the very heart of Leeds, and it's also the heart of the history of film. In 1866, a French photographer moved to Leeds to join a friend from college who ran a firm of brass founders making valves and components. He started making experiments in film, building a camera that used 16 lenses, an early attempt at capturing motion. It led him to patent a single-lens camera that he used to shoot the world's first motion pictures in 1888, a short garden scene in Roundhay, and a 2-second film showing horse-drawn carts and pedestrians crossing Leeds Bridge. Irfan Shah is a researcher and co-writer on the first film, a feature-length documentary on the story of Louis Le Prince and his mysterious demise. So how did Louis Le Prince come to be working and living here in Leeds?
Initially it was friendship, because he was in Paris and he befriended a fellow student who was this enigmatic Yorkshireman named John Whitley, who's from Leeds, and so Whitley invited him back. Le Prince came here in 1866 and he got work here, and he also fell in love with John's sister Lizzie and got married here. So it was friendship, then work, then love.
People know about Edison, people know about the Lumiere brothers and their work as well. Why do you think people, even in film circles, don't really know that much about Le Prince?
Firstly, he disappeared before he could get to tell the world his story. I mean, everyone else had money and films to show and lawyers and PR people, so he never got to control the narrative. Partly today, historians say, A, did he project them back, and B, did he have any influence on the wider story? And, you know, as I've just said, I think the court case against Edison shows that he did have an influence on the wider story of film, and the testimony, I think, suggests that he did project his films back. What I think happened was in the 1920s, a guy called Ernest Kilburn Scott did some booklets telling the Le Prince story, and I think he wanted a slightly sanitised version of the story for various reasons. And so I think he suppressed some of the testimony that said, well, he filmed it half a dozen times, but he was having big problems. And I think that's a testimony that is actually really compelling, because it's really realistic and plausible. And so, in a way, he sort of damaged Le Prince's legacy, because I actually think if you get all that testimony, it makes a really compelling case that Le Prince made his films here and showed them here as well.
So there are lots of theories as to what happened to him. What do you think happened to him?
I think personally, at this moment in time, I think what happened was he was a success as an inventor. So he took the films and he projected them, which is important. But he couldn't do it regularly, he couldn't do it reliably, which is what he needed to do if he wanted to make money to get himself and his family out of debt. And so I don't think he was ready for New York. I don't think he was ready for the demonstration, and I think he knew that, and I think he just wanted to step away from everything, temporarily probably. So I think he just took himself off the radar. But what happened in that space and time exactly, I don't know. I don't know yet.
While Louis Le Prince was pioneering one form of art, another was drawing the crowds into the town night after night, slipping down the Leeds side streets to famous places like this.
The White Swan pub in one of the narrow alleyways off the top of Briggate. Now, there's been a pub on this site since 1748. In the 1830s, pubs like this one began to introduce so-called singing rooms. Now, these were spaces where entertainment was provided and people could eat, drink and smoke while it was going on, and they proved to be tremendously popular. So much so that in 1865, the landlord Charles Thornton built a theatre next door. Now, while the pub has changed beyond recognition, the theatre is pretty much as it always was, despite having several changes of name over the years. And some really famous people performed there, like Charlie Chaplin and Harry Houdini. When Harry Houdini performed here in 1904, he was probably the most famous man in the whole world. And he was paid the sum of £130, 18 shillings and 6 pence, the most anybody had been paid to perform here at any time, about £10,000 in today's money. Now, this is a really rare example of a 19th century music hall, probably the only one surviving outside of London. And the only real difference between how it is now and how it was then is that then 2,000 people would have been crammed in for a performance, about 4 times the current capacity.
There is a royal crest above the stage. Lily Langtry, the famous music hall star, appeared several times at the theatre. She was a popular actress in her day and was said to have had an affair with King Edward VII. There were rumours he used to sneak into the city varieties and watch her perform, and as a thank you for their discretion, he donated the crest, which is now displayed above the auditorium.
For some, music hall was just a bit too down market, so in a quest for cultural quality, the Grand Theatre was built in 1878. It took just 13 months to be built, and it was a hodgepodge of architectural styles, a bit Scottish baronial, a bit Gothic and a bit Romanesque. It seated 1,500 people, and the opening performance was of William Shakespeare's comedy, Much Ado About Nothing. These days, the Grand Theatre is home to Opera North, an initiative championed by the Earl of Harwood, and now one of the finest opera companies in the world.
So we've established that Leeds gave moving pictures to the world, but we also gave them the means to show them. The same year Le Prince made his first film, Abram Kershaw set up a business that within a few years started making cinema projectors. They were called Cayley projectors, that's Kershaw's initials backwards, and the first 3 letters of Leeds. They were used all over the world. And of course they were used back here where it all began, in the thriving picture house scene of early 20th century Leeds. Once upon a time, Armley had 5 of them. Between 1910 and 1914 alone, 8 of them were built in Hunslet. According to one count, by 1939, Leeds had 68 picture houses. One of them still stands to this day. The Hyde Park Picture House was opened just a few weeks into the Great War in 1914. It was dubbed in the press the cosiest picture house in Leeds. When you go there today, it's enchanting. There's no better word for it. It's been used since then as a church, a bingo hall, a cinema for blue movies, shall we say? And today it's a thriving place, with showings of art house pictures alongside all the latest blockbusters. If Leeds is the true birthplace of film, this is its cathedral. Old-fashioned independent cinemas have gone by the wayside, But regional theatres, meanwhile, have witnessed a creative renaissance.
In the 1960s, there was a campaign to establish a repertory theatre in Leeds, as it was the only major city without one. After much campaigning, the University of Leeds offered some land if the group would put their own building up. And so in 1970, the Playhouse was born with the remit of getting more young people to go to the theatre. Eventually, a new theatre was needed, and in 1990, the renamed West Yorkshire Playhouse was opened here on Quarry Hill, the site of notorious slums cleared to make way for the famous Quarry Hill flats, themselves bulldozed to make way for this theatre, the Northern Dance, Leeds College of Music and BBC North. This area is now set to become Soyo, a brand new expanded cultural quarter for the city.
Join us after the break as Jonathan finds out all about the city's cultural ambitions for the future, and I pay a visit to the pictures. Welcome back to Streets of Leeds. On this week's show, Jonathan Straight and me, Mark O'Brien, are exploring the city's captivating cultural heritage.
So in terms of film and theatre, Leeds really punches above its weight. But what about the visual arts? Leeds Arts University used to be called Leeds College of Art, and all kinds of luminaries have studied there. Jacob Kramer, Damien Hirst, Frankie Vaughan, and of course Ricky Wilson, Kaiser Chiefs, yeah. But now we're heading back into town, and let's talk a bit about Henry Moore, probably one of the most famous sculptors of recent history, and in fact in his day an international celebrity. And his signature piece was a reclining figure, and there's one right outside Leeds City Art Gallery.
Great stuff, let's go find it.
Yeah.
The Leeds Art Gallery first opened in 1888, the same year as Louis Le Prince's experiments with film in Roundhay and on Leeds Bridge.
The Leeds Heritage of Artists included Julius Caesar Ibbotson, an 18th century watercolour painter, John Grimshaw, a 19th century painter influenced by the Pre-Raphaelites, and Jacob Kramer, a 20th century artist trained at the Leeds College of Art and a member of the Leeds Arts Club. Now, the Leeds Arts Club was the focal point of modernist culture in the country at the time. Next door is the Henry Moore Institute, part of his legacy of leaving so many of his works in trust. Now, Moore was a big campaigner to make the arts more accessible, championing free admission to art galleries and Sunday opening too.
It's not just artists, but authors too, who've called Leeds home over the decades. Leeds is also home to some very famous authors. Arthur Ransome, the writer of Swallows and Amazons, he lived around Headingley. So did J.R.R. Tolkien, actually, when he was working at the University of Leeds. Alan Bennett famously is a Leeds lad born and raised. So much of his work is reminiscent of ordinary, daily suburban life here in Leeds. He actually went to school briefly with Barbara Taylor Bradford, the world-famous romance author. Her novel, A Woman of Substance, is one of the best-selling books of all time. Over 30 million copies have been sold worldwide. Of course, Leeds has a special place in TV history too. In 1927, 9 years before television broadcasts began, Leeds University hosted the inaugural lecture of what became the Royal Television Society, when John Logie Baird came to the city to show off his experiments with televisor apparatus. We're close now to Kirkstall Road, which in many ways is the cradle of Leeds' television story. It was here in 1968 that Yorkshire TV first started broadcasting with that famous opening track, Ba 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 Ba. You recognise that from an Ilkley Moor Bar tap. And over the years, this has been the home of many great famous productions. Rising Damp was made here. Bruce's Price is Right was briefly made here as well. Of course, certain programmes, Emmerdale and Countdown, they're still made here to this day. And in recent years, the wider Yorkshire region has witnessed a renaissance as a film set. The misty moors and dales, the perfect setting for all manner of period dramas and movies. This is England, Testament of Youth, Dad's Army and Victoria, all made in Yorkshire.
Part of the Quarry Hill campus is the Leeds College of Music, and one of the teachers at Leeds College of Music was Dame Fanny Waterman. Dame Fanny was a concert pianist turned educator, and her Learn Piano books have sold more than 2 million copies worldwide. Now, she is also the founder of the Leeds International Piano Competition, which takes place every 3 years. The heats for the 2018 competition take place in New York, Berlin and Singapore, and Leeds is right up there with those cities because the final will take place in Leeds at the Town Hall and at the University of Leeds in the Great Hall. Unlike other cities, Leeds is not well known for its impact on the contemporary music world. That we had the Gang of Four, formed in 1977, who influenced R.E.M., the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Nirvana. Soft Cell were formed in Leeds, their chart-storming cover of Tainted Love being the result of a last chance for success given by their record company. And the Leeds-based Sisters of Mercy were the goth standard-bearers of the 1980s. Now we have the Kaiser Chiefs, lots to be proud of.
Now think of Liverpool and you think of the Beatles. Think of Manchester, it's the Stone Roses or Oasis. Think of Birmingham and you've got, the Electric Light Orchestra, I suppose. Leeds arguably doesn't have its standout band that the world associates with the city, but plenty of iconic musicians and performers have emerged from right here too. Now in its 31st year, the Leeds International Film Festival celebrates creativity in film. Nick Jones is the communications manager at Leeds Film.
It's dedicated to bringing the best new and classic cinema from around the world to serve audiences all across Leeds. You'll find over 300 screenings and events across 16 days. As you can imagine, we managed to pack quite a lot into that programme. I think the thing that really defines the festival is that you can take a chance on something and have a film experience that you won't have anywhere else, especially at the multiplex. So for me, the most memorable things would be films that I saw that I perhaps haven't even seen referenced anywhere again or since, or that didn't have a general release. At the same time, I've been lucky enough to see some of my favourite films ever on the big screen in Leeds Town Hall because they've been brought back for special retrospective screenings that in themselves are just as rare as those much more marginal screenings that you only get occasionally. Leeds has got lots of incredible cinema spaces. The Hyde Park Picture House is incredibly unique in that it's one of the only of its kind in the country, and we're very much looking forward to seeing its redevelopment over the next year or two with the Picture House project as they're developing the venue to make it more accessible and add an additional screen in the basement. And I think that this is going to do a great service to film growers in the whole of the region, let alone just in Leeds.
Another institution based in the cultural quarter where the Quarry Hill Flats used to stand ominously on the horizon is Northern Ballet, a touring ballet company that grew out of the Northern Dance Theatre that was established way back in 1969.
Now, dance is one of the key parts of the cultural smorgasbord available in Leeds. This building is home to Northern Ballet, but also to the Phoenix Dance Theatre, the longest standing contemporary dance company outside of London. And with me is Sharon Watson, who's artistic director and choreographer for the company. But Sharon has another job of chair of the bid to make Leeds European Capital of Culture 2023. So hi Sharon.
Hi.
What is the European Capital of Culture?
It's an opportunity. It's a creative opportunity to transform a city and to connect us, to keep us connected to the work and the lives of Europeans, including us here as Leeds citizens.
So what would it do for Leeds if we were successful in the bid?
I think without undermining the word transform a city, transform lives, that's exactly what it has an opportunity to do for us.
To make things better for everybody?
Absolutely. Just the way in which we are able to do things through a social, political, cultural agenda, that all of these things are important to the lives of our citizens, and that's the bigger picture across Europe. How can we make a better life for everyone using culture as a basis?
Now, we're talking about culture today. This programme is all about culture. What does culture mean to you?
For me, I've tried to summarise culture. It's such a big experience, such a varied experience for any individual. But I say if you can see it, if you can smell it, if you can hear it, if you can taste it, if you can touch it, all your senses that makes you human, that for me talks about culture.
That's the most fantastic definition. Now then, are we in with a chance to get this?
We certainly are.
That's
I think
fantastic.
after 3.5 years of doing our homework, we are ready now for the submission of our bid, which we've done, and the conversations we need to have with the Europeans.
Well, fingers well and truly crossed. Let's hope we get there.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Sharon.
much.
So Leeds is the birthplace of film, a cradle of working class literature, a place where actors and authors, singers and dancers continue to make work that captivates and delights audiences all over the world.
Yes, but Leeds truly is a capital of culture already, having proudly made a contribution to the arts around Britain and beyond.
And it's all part of the rich culture that's written into the flagstones and cobbles all across the streets of Leeds. Coming up next week on Streets of Leeds, we tell the story of how Leeds institutions fought for public health in the Industrial Revolution, and we take a tour of the Thackeray Medical Museum.